Hi, my name is Tyler Cornelius. I'm a professor at Colorado College, and I'm teaching a class on food systems, a critical look at industrial food, including industrial meat. And I'd like to also introduce 15 students who are on the call. You might see a little S next to their name on some of them. These are first-year college students at Colorado College. So on behalf of them, I'll introduce all of them as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mark?
Hi, Mark Eastep, Montana Mobile Processing. That's me.
Natalie?
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm a new agrarian apprentice through the Kavira Coalition in Eastern Montana and a Colorado College alum.
Ah.
Wow.
Yeah, 2015.
Matt Skoglund.
Yeah, hey everybody, Matt Skoglund. My wife and kids, we own and operate North Bridger Bison in the Shields Valley, north of Bozeman, Montana. We field harvest our bison on our ranch and have been really having a hard time finding processing outlets, and it's only getting harder. We also have a mobile slaughter unit, but we're sort of unable to use it due to the lack of processing. So we are exploring options to, I guess, take meat processing into our own hands and increase capacity in Montana. So appreciate these calls and can't wait to hear what Mike has to say. And thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Matt. Aubrey.
Hi everyone, I'm Aubrey Roth, Montana Farm to School Coordinator, and I'm with Montana Teen Nutrition Program at MSU, and I also co-chair the Montana Beef to School Coalition.
Kathleen Williams.
Kathleen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm Kathleen Williams, candidate for U.S. Congress. I've been an advocate for local food for ages, passed the cottage food bill in the Montana legislature, and really want to work on solving issues for our rural communities and our ag sector in Congress. So thank you for all for getting together on these conversations.
Thanks, Kathleen. Martha Kaufman.
Hi, I'm Martha Kaufman. I am with the World Wildlife Fund's Northern Great Plains program. We work in the 5 states of the Northern Plains on grassland conservation and work with the ranching community to do that. And my interest is in seeing more value go to Montana producers so that we can maintain the grasslands.
Thanks. Welcome. Krister.
Hi, I'm Christopher. I'm a CU MBA student down in Boulder, so locking horns with all those Rams. I'm interested in enabling tech for dispersed supply chains for local products in Montana.
Cole.
Hi, Cole Mannix with Mannix Ranch in western Montana near Helmville.
Ben Thomas.
And Ben Thomas, I'm the director of the Ag Department here in Montana. We've been working hard on the meat processing program. You may have seen last Tuesday, the governor announced that we were reopening consideration for those applicants that did not receive funding in the first pool. So we're working on that. Just excited that there is such coordination going on with all of you. I appreciate that, Jamie. So thanks.
Will.
Hi, this is Will Carrico from Congressman Greg Gianforte's office. I am his legislative director and also handle agriculture issues. So just happy to continue to take in the conversation on this a very important topic.
Great. Can you make sure you're, not you, Will, but can someone make sure they're muting their microphone? There's a lot of background noise right now. That. Tammy Burke.
I'm Tammy Burke. I'm the Food and Egg Development Center Director for Eastern Montana, and I cover 2 economic development regions, Great Northern Economic Development in Wolf Point, and then also Eastern Plains. And I am a technical resource for producers that want to create a new revenue stream. I've been really focused on meat processing lately. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Tom Cheetah.
Hi, we ranch in Bridger, Montana, and I'm on the board of the Yellowstone Valley Food Hub. It's a growers co-op based in the Billings area.
Jeff Szczecinski.
Hi, this is Jeff Szczecinski. My daughter works for you guys, Michelle, but she's not on the phone today. I'm a natural resource and ag economist with the National Center for Appropriate Technology. I worked on federal policy related to marketing of grass finished and beef in general. I've done some feasibility studies with organic growers and grass finished growers over the years. It's been an issue dear to my heart. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Davey Madison.
Hi, this is Davey Madison. I'm the program director at the Montana Cooperative Development Center.
Christy Clark.
Good morning, I'm Christy Clark. I'm the Deputy Director for the Montana Department of Agriculture, and excited to hear about this. We're working hard trying to build the infrastructure for meat processing in Montana through the grants, and I'm anxious to hear what you guys have to think and say.
Thanks, Christy. Susan Elder.
Hi, I'm Susan Elder, and I am, along with Natalie, I'm also doing the agrarian or the apprenticeship with the Quivira Coalition, and I'm at Charter Ranch north of Billings right now.
Good deal. Meg O'Leary.
Morning, Meg O'Leary. I'm a private consultant. I was Governor Bullock's former commerce director, and I'm currently working on the MMEC feasibility study for Jefferson Local Development Corp.
Mike Honeycutt.
Good morning, Mike Honeycutt. I lead the Montana Department of Livestock. We're the agency responsible for meat and poultry inspection within the state of Montana, regulating meat depots, custom exempts, and cooperating with USDA Food Safety Inspection Service on state-inspected USDA grant-inspected facilities.
Thanks, Mike. And Mike was our speaker last week, or last month, I should say. Thank you again. Courtney Loeffler.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Courtney Loeffler, and I am the Food and Egg Development Center Director here at Headwaters. It's located in Butte, and we cover a 7-county region. So I'm really excited to be able to be a part of this and learn more about it and be able to share my knowledge across our region.
Thanks, Courtney. Megan Lannon.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Megan Lannon. I own and operate a regenerative grass-fed, grass-finished beef operation in Paradise Valley. And much like Mike, or Matt, sorry, Matt, just really trying to be an active part and play an active role in the processing conversation. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Walter.
Walter Schweitzer. I'm president of Montana Farmers Union, the largest ag organization representing family farms and ranches. And I'm looking forward to this meeting. I always enjoy Mike Callicrate's presentations.
Thanks, Walter. And if I didn't call your name, if you want to jump in and introduce yourself quick.
Yeah, this is Jesse Anderson, Senator Tester's Agriculture Liaison in Helena.
Thanks, Jesse.
And I'm Paul Herendeen. I'm with Clearwater Credit Union. We're a member-owned, not-for-profit community financial institution headquartered in Missoula, and I work on our social impact programs.
Welcome, Paul. Anyone else? Okay, Becky, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is turning into a pretty powerful cast of thousands if we can keep it going. yeah, I think most of you already know I'm chairman of the Montana Organic Association and work with Jamie. I'm also a sheep rancher and have also, like Walt, been hearing Mike's name for many years. I just want to say a couple things before we jump right in. I'm not going to give a lot of background on Mike. Jamie has already forwarded some websites and a lot of online resources. You can learn about his history. He's got experience from very hands-on ranching, veterinary strategies, all the way through marketing and processing issues. And he also is familiar with this backdrop that we all deal with of the antitrust issues that are part of the story we have to face here. I also just want to thank the group of students here. We may be jumping ahead of some of the backstory you're familiar with. I'd be happy to spend time with you after this call to provide some explanations if necessary, because we may jump over some things, and there may, and for that matter, that applies to anybody on this call. If there are questions after the call that don't get answered, please don't hesitate to contact me, because we've got a lot to cover. And for Mike, I guess I would just like to say, you know, there's a lot of players on this call, as you just heard, who have their fingers in different pieces of this large, complicated picture. Many of the people on this call have a ton of experience, some with less. But the sort of the theme behind your talk, in my view, is that there's a lot of people who want to see on the ground work proceed. There's also people who understand that there are some policy, legal issues that this industry is going to have to face over the next years. But in the meantime, we want to keep the needle moving. And so we would really love to hear what your current view of this complex story is. And, you know, a lot of your experience isn't in Montana, but the issues are the same. So as you move through your talk, however you choose to structure it, we'd like you to keep in mind we are a group of people who want to keep the ball rolling and trying to figure out the right way to work on the nuts and bolts stuff at the ground level, while also being wise about the broader context and the longer term economic challenge that faces agriculture more broadly. And with that, I want to hand it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Becky. And I think we're going to cover it based upon what you've just said. And I'm really impressed to have the people on the call. I think everybody is here that can, the right parts and pieces, I think, have been assembled here to really move the thing forward. So I want to just talk a little bit about, why do we need a different food system? And then we're going to talk about, how we can get there, in my view. So I've got some slides I put together. Building community around local food, a pathway to food security and resilience. And I know your outfit's called Resilient Montana. And so I want to just sort of talk about a little bit about, the food system we have and how do we get to the food system we want. And I think that, let's see, how do we get this? And I think COVID has given us a really great opportunity here to realize just how broken the industrial food system we have now is. And in fact, it's got the attention of the people that we have to have on our side if we're going to fix it. And that's the people who eat, the consumers. And I'm not saying we're going to keep their attention forever, but I think we've got it right now, and we can't waste the opportunity to offer something better and to work with the consumer and the taxpayer and the citizen of this country to try to really develop something that works for us. And so basically COVID exposed the failed food system, the abusive, unhealthy, inhumane, and it's incapable of feeding people. We know that. And so the questions I have is, how do we become more food secure, reduce and decentralize abusive market power, ensure farmers, ranchers, and workers earn living incomes, rebuild rural economies, produce healthier and safer food, and how do we become resilient? So this was on a Saturday evening on March 13th. On the left is the Ranch Foods Direct local supply chain, my company, which has been around about 20 years. And we have the global supply chain on the right. This is the supply chain that claims all the efficiencies and economies of scale. This is the supply chain that's going to search the world for the cheapest of everything, and it's going to deliver it to your shopping basket, saving you money, and supposedly the consumer and the taxpayer wins, and the big corporations make plenty of money. And so it failed. So just looking back on more of the why we care about this issue and what we can do about it. This is a little farmer homestead just north of my place in St. Francis, Kansas, about a mile north. And this is really a picture of rural America. You know, as you sit in the city and you hear about Wall Street and how great the stock market is, this is what's really occurring out in the wealth creating regions of America, where crops and meat and food and all of that is produced. This is really what that economy looks like. So we've lost nearly half our ranchers, over 90% of our hog farmers, over 80% of our dairymen in the last 35 years. And you might just correlate that too, since it's on our minds these days, about these commodity checkoffs. This is about the amount of time that these commodity checkoffs have been in place. And I guess we could ask ourselves, what have they really done for us? And so looking back, I got started in the cattle business in about 1975. Built my first feed yard in 1978. It held about 14,000 cattle. Built my second one in 86. It's about a 12,000 head capacity feedlot. And I just sort of evolved into the Ranch Foods Direct company because I was unable to get a meat packer to buy cattle after I started complaining about their abusive market power and the fact that there wasn't a competitive market, that the packers were cooperating rather than competing. And so in 1998, in December of 1998, I realized I was in real trouble. I had 14,000 cattle in a 12,000 head feedlot. I couldn't sell them. Called Dan Glickman, the Secretary of Agriculture, and I said, why don't you enforce the Packers and Stockyards Act? And I wouldn't have this problem. He says, well, you know, Mike, in this modern day of globalization, we need big companies that can do business globally. And so he'd been lobbied and he'd been drinking that corporate concentration, globalization Kool-Aid. And in fact, all he did for me was basically call ConAgra, which is now the JBS company out of Greeley. And he made them buy all my cattle and I emptied the feedlot. I didn't give up. I still worked towards legislation, litigation. That case was going on that I filed against IBP, the biggest meat packer in the country, along with other cattle producers. We had a class action lawsuit in process at that time. And then about a year later, I decided the heck with it. I mean, we can litigate, we can legislate, but let's build the alternative pathway to the consumer. And I started Ranch Foods Direct, and that was about 20 years ago. But you can see, correlated with meat packer concentration, in 1975, four firm concentration was under 40%. And by 2020, and actually by 95, even the late 80s, four firm concentration in the meatpacking industry was 85%. And so the meat packers did have control of the market. And for those of us who subscribe to the cattle facts or members of NCBA, we were all the time being conditioned that, hey, there is a market. You guys just have to learn how to compete with pork and poultry. You have to become a low cost producer. And they just sort of used our checkoff dollars actually to help mentally condition us to believe it was our fault if we were failing in business. And this chart clearly shows that we lost 36% of our share of the retail beef dollar. And that has dropped to as low as 27% during COVID last spring. And so we're way, way short of getting our share back to the farm and ranch gate of what consumers spend for meat. And John Tyson agrees about the market power, but he's blaming it on Walmart. He says Walmart is so big that they can tell us what to pay and we have to pay less. And of course, we're suggesting that you wouldn't be able to pay less if the market was competitive for live cattle. And so you can't sue Walmart because of Illinois Brick. We're an indirect seller. And so we do have to sue Tyson and the meat packers that stand between us and the retailer and the consumer. And so this is the biggest issue right here. There's never been more money in the food system, but we've just never received so little of it. And these are not nice guys. The Tyson family story is in the book, The Meat Racket. It's required reading. You really need to understand what criminals you're actually dealing with here. These are people who are focused on profit, return on investment, making Wall Street shareholders happy. And this is who you are hoping is going to share with you the dollars that they generate in processing your animals and whatever you may produce on the farm. The Brazilian Batista company family is no better than the Tysons. In fact, they might even be ahead of them on serious felony counts. Tyson's got plenty of felony counts, but the Batistas have taken it to another level. These guys are really, really close. And just recently, since COVID, these two guys were released from jail and from their ankle bracelets to go back to the company as essential workers, to go back to the company and run JBS. And so this is another company we're having to deal with. Cargill is really no better, but they've got a way better marketing department and create a better image than these other companies. They're a lot smarter, and they're not a publicly owned company. So we've got a partnership between big corporations and our government. We see this every day with the policy that we see coming out of Washington. We propose legislation to try to improve our situation, improve competition, keep the environment cleaner, to incentivize the steward on the land, and we just continue to lose. And there's a real reason for it. These guys not only have market power, but they have political power. And they've turned our agriculture into an agribusiness mining operation like none other. And we talked about Tyson's relationship to Walmart and Kroger's relationship to Cargill. We got Whole Foods that's really no better than the other retailers, and particularly now that Bezos bought Whole Foods with Amazon. So we've got more and more concentration occurring, and it doesn't appear that we're going to get a lot done, or haven't got anything done as of yet. There is a little bit of hope here, I think, going forward. But basically what we've got is the big retailers are robbing the bank, the big packers are driving the partnership. If you want to go back another step in the supply chain, the packers are robbing the bank, and the big captive supply feedlots are driving the getaway car. And so it's in the interest of the big meat packer suppliers, the captive supply feedlots, to buy calves out of Montana just as cheap as they possibly can, because they can't sell cattle higher. It's easier for them to buy cattle cheaper than to sell their finished cattle higher. So this is just transitions right on back to the farm and ranch being the big loser in this supply chain. The industrial food pantry, Cisco, US Foods, they almost merged. We were successful in stopping that merger, but it was close. But these companies had already worked together long enough to be pretty knowledgeable of each other. And I'm convinced that they cooperate today rather than compete. The merger was not approved. It would have made Cisco with really a full-blown monopoly over food service, which I think they hold now in partnership really with US Foods. And so this is a model of food distribution that is extremely offensive. Human exploitation, animal suffering, environmental degradation, community destruction, family farm and rural decline, regenerative diseases through the fake food that they sell, and I thought Francisco Chavez, our Ranch Foods Direct delivery guy and salesperson, worked for us for about 11 years. He's now retired. But he came in one day and he said, Mike, that Cisco truck, they sell things from somewhere else and take the money away every day. And he was really comparing that to Ranch Foods Direct. where the money stayed in the community, in the region where our animals are produced. And of course, Ranch Foods Direct is also a conduit for other people who raise animals or produce something in the region that we help them reach a market for that product. But, you know, I wrote a piece, it's on my blog, it's called The Tapeworm Economy. And this is Cisco's a great example, selling things from somewhere else and taking the money away every day. Well, really, that's chain restaurants. That's franchise businesses. That's anything that's based on Wall Street. And so as we see the news every day, when we turn on the major news networks, you're seeing that Wall Street ticker going along in the corner of the screen. And you are conditioned to believe that your well-being is directly related to the health of Wall Street and the return on the investments on Wall Street, when actually it's an inverse relationship. It's actually the opposite of that. The better Wall Street is doing, the worse Main Street is going to be doing, and the worse the producer, the worker is going to be doing, and the worse off the environment will be. And so we've got to get this straightened out, and that's a real challenge to get through to the eater, the consumer, and hopefully the citizen, to make better decisions around people who represent us in policy-making positions and in policy in general. I want to talk about the barriers to the marketplace. It's predatory pricing. It's food fraud. This is an example. University of Colorado Springs said that they wanted to go self-managed, which was a smart idea. They wanted to get rid of Sodexo, which they did. And their promise was that they were going to serve local, healthier food, better food, and give the students a better deal over what Sodexo was doing. And so they made the transition to being self-managed. But here's the burger, the Peak Burger. It says exclusively at Clyde's for the fall semester. This burger is produced, the brand is Aspen Ridge beef. Well, Aspen Ridge is a fake brand of JBS. So they went right back to the cheapest food they could find, and the students aren't getting a better deal. And the Callicrate beef that was formerly at Jake's under Sodexo's management has now been replaced with JBS product. Nobody knows where it comes from. It very likely comes from South America, come from Canada, it come from any of 20 different countries, but you can be assured that it's the cheapest raw materials they can possibly find. It's pretty frustrating when you go across the country and you're looking at people that are excited about building some local regional food systems, and they're all so convinced that they're going to get into those schools. They're convinced that they know somebody on the school board, and they're excited about maybe buying some local food, meat perhaps. And as soon as you start and you deliver your first order, maybe it's on down the road a few months, but then these big companies come in and just undercut you. And there is no antitrust law enforcement today on predatory pricing. And so the school's resolve is tested right away. And Tyler here from Colorado College can attest to that. Even Bon Appetit to be regenerative, sustainable, and all the wonderful things is now buying the cheapest food they can find from Cisco for the students at Colorado College. It's just a flat out betrayal. So there's never been more money in the food business, and there's never been a time that the producer has received so little of the consumer dollar. It goes right along with the level of concentration and consolidation in our food system. Let's look at the return on equity. And this reveals just whether or not a market is competitive. Tyson, the meat packer, 17.2% on a 5-year average return on equity. Now that's something that your 401k and your retirement fund may want to invest in. That's pretty impressive, especially for a commodity business. I mean, all they do is slaughter cattle and cut them up. It's nothing that we haven't done for 10,000 years. So what entitles them to a 17.2% return? Lack of competition, basic market power. Kroger, the big retailer, either one or two, Walmart's bigger than Kroger now, but they've been in that 1 and 2 position biggest retailer in the country, food retailer, 31.6%. And they're supposed to be in a competitive market as well. And of course, that's just not true. We don't have competition in any of these markets. But the winner here is Sysco. This is the company that buys cheap, sells high, and predatory prices competition out. These are companies that play with the numbers. They'll come in, you might be serving some local ground beef, going to test that out. And they'll say, well, first of all, you're in violation of your agreement. You've got to buy 95% of your food purchases from Sysco. And you know, you're going to violate that agreement if you buy Callicrate's beef or if you buy someone else's beef that's local. But they will lower the price, and at the same time, they'll raise the prices on all the other items you're buying. It might go out a couple decimal points, but they will absolutely maintain their margins. And it's very deceptive. And I think the restaurants and institutional accounts need to be better informed on how Sysco's playing them. But I'm always looking at that inscription above the main portico of the USDA building in Washington, D.C. And I was made aware of that inscription years ago by Albert Krebs. And Albert used to talk about the husbandman that laboreth must be the first partaker of the fruits, a quote from St. Paul. So it goes back a long ways that, you know, the people that care for our land, the people who husband our livestock, the people who do the work, take the risk, those are the people who should be sharing in the fruits of those labors and in the fruits of that production first. And the way it is right now, the producer of livestock, the producer of our food, grains, and everything else is basically getting the crumbs that are left over. And the workers I just don't know how you can exploit workers any worse than we're doing now. I mean, even after COVID, they're forcing them back on the lines in these slaughterhouses. It's a reminder of the book, The Jungle, except I would argue it's worse today than it was in the days of Upton Sinclair when he wrote The Jungle. I think it's worse today in every single respect. But what is the opportunity here in selling direct? We talked about there's never been more money in the food business. Just how much money is there? And so here's a set of cattle that I processed at St. Francis for some ranchers down in central Kansas. And this was an interesting story. This family got caught in the Tyson fire market collapse last fall. And their calves, the price just went down significantly. And they decided, you know, this is terrible. I mean, we aren't gonna make it with these kind of prices. And so they sent them to a Scott City, Kansas feedlot. At the time that those cattle were getting ready for market, we hit COVID, the COVID hit. And so these people are getting the 1-2 punch. They got the Tyson price collapse, and then again, they got hit in the feedlot after investing a lot more money in the cattle with the COVID thing. And so the feedlot manager called them up and said, look, we're not going to be able to sell these cattle. There's not a market. There's almost 1 million cattle standing on the sidelines waiting for slaughter that we don't know when we would ever be able to get them slaughtered. And so they called me up and they said, what do you think? And I said, send them to me. And so they sent them to St. Francis. I put them on feed in my place. And here's the result. This is it. This is what happened. The animals averaged 1,437 pounds. They yielded 63.5% in the carcass so a 912 pound carcass. So these are big, healthy Angus crosses that are really high quality, but also have a lot of growth genetics. And so we can make these animals bigger without making yield grade 4s and making them over fat. The retail meat yield on these animals was 47%. And that's based upon a bone-in standard cut. And we cut these up into what we call a cow pool. So somebody can buy an eighth, they can buy a quarter, they can buy a half or a whole, but everything is divided up into eighths. So if you want a half, you just get 4/8. And if you want a quarter, you get 2/8. And so it's easy to market to the customer. Everything is weighed exactly to the pounds of meat that's in the box. So the consumer's getting a good deal. And if you look at the average retail price at USDA's report that comes out the middle of the month, every month, the average retail scanner price for fresh beef going across the scanners in the big stores is $6.75 a pound. That's fluctuated up to $7.58 down to now at about $6.49. But this is $6.75 is basically the price that you're paying at Walmart for the meat that they're selling. But these animals are drug-free, they're high quality, you're buying direct from a rancher. And so if you multiply the 675 pounds times, which is the retail weight, times the price of $6.75 per pound, you've got a gross sales of $4,556. Now subtract off your costs, the slaughter fee of $125. And that's high compared to where we used to be, but hides are not worth anything anymore. When I started out 20 years ago, hides were $75. Now they're zero. In fact, you have to pay the rendering company to pick them up. We're lucky because we compost on site. We just compost the hides along with our slaughter waste in our manure piles. And so the slaughter fee is at $125. The processing fee is 85 cents based on the carcass weight. That's $775. And that gives you a really nice retail package, cryovac vacuum package that will last a long time in their freezer. Carcass freight to the plant, $30 a head. Box charges about $40 a head. So the total income after processing is $3,586. Divided by the weight of 1437 gives you a average weight per pound live of $2.50 a pound. And that's compared to the market that day. If you could even sell the cattle, you likely could, a packer likely wouldn't have purchased them, but the reported price was 95 cents. That's $2,227 more selling to the consumer than what Tyson, Cargill, JBS, and National Beef are going to pay you. This is a travesty. I mean, the government at some point absolutely has to step in and say, enough. We've got to enforce these Packers and Stockyards Acts, all the other antitrust laws. We have to do something about this continuing extraction of wealth from our farm and ranch community. And another number that I'm frustrated with is we now see, in Montana, what percent of the economy does ag represent? And it's just a declining number. Yet this amazing wealth creating enterprise, had they been paid what they are deserving of in a competitive market, ag would represent a huge, much bigger number in Montana. Same way in Wyoming, same way all across the country in our ag producing states. And so when you're in a legislature and people are saying what a small percentage ag represents, you're not seeing the real picture, because that value, that wealth is being stolen by the middlemen, and it's not reflected in the numbers as far as wealth created in the state. So we need to look at increasing the dollars at the farm and ranch gate through building alternative pathways to the marketplace. And I think we can do that, but we've got to be careful. We got to be smart in how we go about it. This is just today's news. Cory Booker, he's saying a savagely broken food system. He wants radical reform. We've worked with Cory Booker. I'm convinced. I would have loved to have seen some antitrust in this presidential election that we're facing right now. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, they're break them up. Reduced market power. I want to see that message. And in fact, we've been very hard on Joe Biden's campaign here lately because he doesn't talk about it. And he brings in advisors like Tom Vilsack, who are big fans of industrial agriculture and globalization. And we've got to drive that wedge between the Biden campaign and the people like Vilsack, who are just part of the old problem that we've been dealing with that's got us where we are today. So I'm hopeful that we can see some movement in Congress to make some changes. 2 books that are out right now, they just came out. They're excellent. It talks about how industries have been monopolized, and they talk about all of them, from airlines to banks to railroads again, like in the 1900. meat packers, tech, cell phones. We've got Google, we've got Facebook, Amazon. It's talked about in these books. I'd highly recommend reading these books. So break them up and monopolize. And the other book that'll be out on September 29th is The Liberty from All Masters. Barry Lynn, he really leads this whole antitrust movement in the country with his Open Markets Institute. Got a lot of respect for the work that Barry does. So let's build this thing. Public and community food utilities, building safe and profitable pathways to the consumer. I'm suggesting that the consumer helps us, the citizen, the taxpayer. This is critical infrastructure, just like roads and bridges and other types of infrastructure, just like the REA lines that run to your ranch and give you power out there in that remote part of rural America. We need a public food utilities to be set up where the rancher doesn't have to invest more than what he's already got invested, which is the 85% of what it takes to put food on the plate. We need consumers. We need, and I know you hate that word consumers, and I do too, because all they're doing is consuming. And I think that one of the most deadly diseases in America today and around the world really, but mostly in America, is aggressive price shopping consumerism. We have been taught that if you pay too much, you're just a bad person. You're just not very smart. You've got to beat them up. You got to buy it as cheap as you can. And you don't even realize that you're destroying the very community that you're living in when you behave this way. And so we have to connect to consumers, and hopefully in some way we can convince them to think about their citizenship responsibilities as well. In other words, stop looking at only yourself. Let's build better communities. Well, if you're going to sell direct to the consumer, you got to tell your story. And all the ranchers that I know have a great story. But I also understand that not every rancher wants to be in the meat business. Not every rancher can be in the meat business. But if enough of us are in the meat business that we can expose the wrongdoing and the unfairness and the inequities of this, then I think we can raise the price overall for ranchers in general. So there needs to be at least some of us do it. And I think states can lead this effort, like Montana. Wyoming's got a program that's going right now that sounds positive. So tell the story. And when I decided to transition away from an industrial feedlot that held 12,000 cattle, I just decided, what can I do to make beef wonderful? The best it can possibly be. Well, you get rid of the performance enhancing drugs to start with. You use an Angus cow with a Wagyu bull. I want some marbling. I want it to taste really good. I'm gonna go to rotational grazing. I'm gonna grow grass. I'm gonna grow crops. I'm gonna put the manure back on the land. When the bones are available after processing, I'm gonna cook them in a stock pot, and I'm gonna make broth. I'm gonna sell that. And then I'm gonna take those bones. I'm gonna make bone char out of them and add it to my compost pile, so my calcium and phosphorus and carbon are going back onto the land. So it's all about the soil to me. That's my message to my customers that shop at Ranch Foods Direct. It's about the soil. And if you read David Montgomery's book, Dirt, you'll realize that if we don't take care of the soil, we will go extinct as a species. We have to have soil, and it has to be healthy soil with a lot of biological life going on in it. And we've got to reduce the use of these inputs like commercial fertilizers and chemicals. And so how do I get to the consumer? Well, I certainly can't ask one of the big meat packers to slaughter my animals and let me sell my meat direct. And so I started slaughtering at GNC Packing in Colorado Springs. They basically went out of business when they lost their biggest customer, who built his own plant. And again, can't emphasize enough how predatory the market is and how you can build some infrastructure, you can get a mobile unit, but that doesn't mean you're going to get to sell your product. You may get stuck with a lot of carcasses that you can't get cut up, for example. I heard that earlier from the Bridger operation, having trouble getting that cut operation in place to where we can reach the consumer. And so basically what I did at St. Francis at my cattle operation is I brought in a mobile slaughter unit that we built out of an old IBP tram trailer, which is kind of a cool story on its own. These were the tram trailers that they hauled full half swinging beef on from small plants in the Midwest into the big IDP plants where the box operation was going on. And so these are the trailers that they used as a weapon to put the small plants out of business across the Midwest. This was one of the weapons that they used against small plants. So this has got a full corral system. This is the same kind of corral system that you'll see if you watch the bull riding on TV. This is the same setup. It's got a kill box. We kill the animal, we hoist it, we bleed it. It goes inside the trailer then where we pull the hide off and gut it and split it. And it's the same thing we've been doing for 10,000 years. It's very simple. Anybody can do, well, not everybody can do it, but most people can do it if they're trained. I spent yesterday with a young man from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who drove out all the way to St. Francis, Kansas to work in our mobile unit. He's going to get in that business in Pennsylvania. And he's a smart young guy and a hard worker. And I think he'll be successful. So this is basically what our operation looks like at St. Francis. When we needed to slaughter more often, almost on an everyday basis, we decided to put up a building and just move the mobile slaughter unit inside. And the idea was that we could control weather better and eliminate some of those factors that keep you from processing on any given day. And so basically, we've got a slaughter waste, it's composted in our manure piles. So a feedlot makes the ideal place for a mobile unit to be located because you've got manure, you've got biomass, you can compost your slaughter waste, which now does include the hide. Wastewater, we can contain that in our existing feedlot runoff ponds that are all approved under the state of Kansas. So two big challenges if you go mobile is what are you going to do with the slaughter waste and what are you going to do with the runoff water? And so I like the idea of a feedlot, a sale barn, something like that, where the pens are good and you can hold those animals for a few days if need be. You can feed them and take good care of them. So what we've done now is we've transitioned into more of a brick and mortar operation. So here you can see a new kill box there little bit off to the left. We've got a hide puller there to the right and lower part of the screen. We've really now stepped it up to where it's more of a real slaughter operation. Although those animals do go into the mobile unit to get gutted and split and cooled. So the next step beyond that is to build on a carcass cooler and get rid of the mobile slaughter unit. So here with the truck you see backed up to the mobile unit, that's the docking section. So there's a 6-foot docking section on the back of this mobile unit, and that's where you're going to quarter the half carcass into quarters. And then that truck transports about 45 cattle at a time into Colorado Springs, where they're cut up and sold. This is the next step at St. Francis. It's almost complete. This carcass cooler on the lower part of the drawing is what we needed to replace the mobile slaughter unit. And then we'll have a regular open kill floor we can process about 30 cattle a day, which is double what we're able to do now. And this cooler here will hold about 70 cattle. So this is something you do only after you have absolutely guaranteed that you've got a market and you can control your distribution. The company that's doing a lot of business these days is Friesla. They work out of the Tri-Van operation up in Ferndale, Washington. But Bob Lauder has got some amazing equipment. He's got anything from a 36-foot mobile unit to modular units that are taller and wider and can do full processing, cutting up the meat, freezing it, etc. So this is a good option. And I like it because if you're wrong or if you get tired and don't want to do it anymore, you've got a valuable asset that you can recover the investment back from when you sell it. And so what are the advantages? What does it mean if we can slaughter animals where they're at? Well, it's most certainly more humane treatment. As the big packers have put out their competitors, the distance to market has only increased. We've got cattle today out of the Dakotas that are traveling 600 miles just to get to a slaughter plant in Kansas. And so this is extremely stressful on those animals. It affects their meat quality. If you can haul carcasses into a cut plant as opposed to the live animal, you're transporting 37% less weight to the market. And of course, then if you have a setup like mine, you've got slaughter waste that becomes valuable soil nutrients. And of course, jobs are seriously appreciated in these rural communities. And in our operation, that represents about 5 jobs just in the slaughter operation. In our mobile slaughter operation, we can kill about 4 animals per man per day. Compare that to the big meat packers like Tyson, JBS, and Cargill National. They're killing right at 1.5 to 1.6 animals per man per day. So they are not more efficient. Their claim of efficiency is a lie. And of course, it's a lot further to market now for most people to get to these plants. Who's paying that bill? So the rancher's paying the freight, and freight has gotten more and more expensive as the years have passed. The other thing is water. Water is a precious commodity, especially if you're over the Ogallala Aquifer. It's declining rapidly. We use less than 50 gallons per animal slaughtered, and the big meat packers are using between 730 and 740 gallons per animal slaughtered. This is just a couple examples of how the big system is not at all better. And so the other thing is, why, but the first response you'll get from the big packers, yeah, but we process it into boxed beef. That's why we can get fewer animals per man. And that's not true. They ought to be able to get more animals per man if these workers were skilled, but they use an unskilled labor force, externalize the cost of paying a fair wage, externalize the medical costs in the community, the welfare costs that are attributed to the taxpayer. And these big packers, there is no excuse for what they do. So they do put it in a box. Yes, that's true. But what if you would dry age it for 6 to 7 days? According to the University of Wisconsin, you would have a clean carcass. You would have 100% pathogen control. You wouldn't worry about E. coli and salmonella and other pathogens that can exist on that carcass. Plus, we've got a much slower chain speed. I mean, the big meat packers are killing up to 400 animals an hour. We kill one about every 20 minutes. And so it's a much safer, slower, and the workers are more skilled. But we take the carcass and completely bypass the boxed beef piece. That's just so that the big retailers can get boxed beef and the big food service companies can get boxed beef, and that they can then cut it and sell it to somebody through their large cut plants where, again, more refugee labor is used. And so basically we take the carcass as it comes into Colorado Springs and cut it up into retail. So we bypass that, making us even more efficient than the big meat packers. So they've got no argument on the economies of scale and efficiency. So I think one of the key components in building this alternative food system is food hubs. And what we did with our new facility that we've been in about 3 years now, this is the old Federal Food Service business that we bought their facility. Basically, Cisco put them out of business. They'd been around a long time, and they left behind this beautiful facility that we were able to buy and convert to meat processing. And then we also now have all the freezer and cooler storage. There's a kitchen inside where we've got Matt Campbell making his mountain pies, which are meat pies using our meat, and he's got a place to store all of his ingredients and a place to store his finished product prior to shipping. So the food hub is critical. This is a privately owned business. I own it. I wouldn't recommend getting partners that are money guys because they have unrealistic expectations. It either needs to be owned by someone who, like myself, wants to build that better food system, isn't solely focused on maximum return on investment, but ideally what these food hubs need to be is they need to be owned by the public. This needs to be critical infrastructure that guarantees our food safety, our food sovereignty, and resilience in the country. So this is just a retail store that we had where our old plant was located. We built a nice amount of business over there. The lease ran out. We were unable to stay, and we were lucky enough to find that new facility. but this store is located in the old neighborhood where we were located. This is what it looks like inside. We do a final dry age on our primal cuts, on the middle meats. When you walk in the door and you look to your left, you can see these carcasses, pieces of carcass, loins and primal cuts hanging, getting a little more age on them. We've got everything local, everything we can find local, from applesauce to popcorn to meat to vegetables. Everything we can do to get people as close to the consumer as possible, we're doing it at Ranch Foods Direct. So this kind of stuff I think needs replicated. Biteable is an exciting new company that's being incubated out of our plant in Colorado Springs. And this is a blockchain model where they can track from the farm to the plate. I'm really impressed with these folks. If you go to our website, ranchfoodsdirect.com, this is the platform that manages our mail order business. And they've got a system that's set up that is very, very impressive. So they can track for the consumer's knowledge, they can track everything right back to where that food originated. So what's the first step in establishing new local regional food infrastructure? I think we need city councils in urban areas to agree to building the public market food hubs, the community food utilities concept, connecting local farmers and ranchers as directly as possible with consumers. And so maybe it's Lamar, Colorado, maybe it's Riverton, Wyoming, Cheyenne, Casper. We have to get the cities on our side. And the people that will oppose your effort vehemently, absolutely will die on their sword is the developer and the rent collector. Because these markets, the Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia.
Why does it keep doing this?
Is the best, can y'all see it okay? This is the best public market I've ever been in. There's 70 vendors. It's their permanent locations. It's their main locations, and the rents are affordable. And they're basically, you can't go broke in this place. Everybody helps each other. The city owns the facility, so there's not a yearly rent increase. And basically, the folks on the city council of Philadelphia love small business, and they don't like chains generally. This is what it looks like inside that market. They've got a cheese making operation. They got 2 full retail meat companies inside. What I would add to this is a carcass processing facility for all species and a cut room behind glass where the consumer, the shopper, the eater can look in and see what's going on. They can absolutely know where their food comes from. The other great thing about this model, this public market type model, is it becomes an organizing space. It's a community space where people talk to each other. It's not like they're going to Walmart and ignoring everyone and just getting out as quick as they can with the cheapest stuff they can find. This will have everything you can imagine, from beer to wine to meat to prepared foods, all of it coming from the region. So a lot of it probably should have a canning facility in it, some value-added capacity for all kinds of foods that are grown in the region. In Colorado Springs, it would be great to have something like that, with much of what's in it coming out of that Arkansas Valley, one of the richest valleys in the country that is separated the water from the land, and the water's being used to pump north to Colorado Springs and build more houses out east on a beautiful ranch that I would have preferred stayed open space. But the consumers, the citizens of Colorado Springs, don't know what's going on. They don't realize how insecure they are around food. And so hopefully a public market can educate, and a public market, I hope, would make a consumer transition from that aggressive price shopping mentality to being a citizen again. When you have a public market like this in Philadelphia, now you are going to impact who's on city council, who's going to be the mayor. We can start building communities again that serve the people instead of Wall Street interests. Here's an example of a public market. It's probably been 8 years ago that we started working on this public market concept in Colorado Springs. And this was an old lumberyard that we did a whole rendering on, and in fact did detailed construction drawings that cost about $30,000. And we were going to transform this huge space which was just zombie buildings. It hadn't been touched for like 10 or 12 years when we started looking at it. And we were going to convert it into a public market space. Very exciting. The community was behind it, but the developer wasn't behind it. The people who owned the land weren't behind it. And so we kind of wasted our time there, and we weren't able to complete this project. And this was also going to be the new home for Ranch Foods Direct after that lease ran out. And so this market was proposed in Colorado Springs, and instead of supporting the local food system development, local leadership decided to turn it into a parking lot, which it is today. It's just simply a paved parking lot. And that's for people who want to visit the Olympic Museum and go to the sports stadium that they're building there now. This would have had economic impact on the region. It would have been amazing. It would have been the #1 tourist spot in the city. It would have been where everybody would want to go at the end of the day if they're staying at one of the hotels in the area. So anyway, it didn't happen in Colorado Springs, but you have to realize that Colorado Springs is the city that Eric Schlosser talks about in Fast Food Nation. It is fast food. It is chain restaurants. It is owned by the developer interests. And so we're trying to do this kind of work in a city it's probably the most difficult in the country. So now we've got a second chance. Actually, it's more like a fourth chance. This isn't the only location we worked on, but the Drake power plant is going to be closing down. And we're looking at the possibility of a public market space that's really spectacular on that Drake location. And the Colorado Springs Utility CEO likes the idea. So that's it. That's what I had to offer today.
Wow. Can't thank you enough for that, Mike. I think that all the complex issues that you have brought up are a reminder of the parallel issues that we have here in Montana. It's not exactly the same, but the backstory of the beef industry is the same. Before we get to questions, I just want to make one comment, and I think it's going to be the backdrop for where we move in our next call. One of the things that we talked about before is that this group of people on this call were well aware that we need to set out some specific objectives and goals. We've been postponing that while we're in a critical information gathering stage. And Mike's presentation of the issues is a painful reminder that it's going to be difficult for us to really lay out a specific strategy until we know and perhaps help direct where this election takes us, both statewide and nationwide. And I think Mike's discussion reveals clearly that whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, the issues that have been plaguing Montana and U.S. agriculture are really not as partisan as we are often led to believe. So I just want to keep that in mind as we move forward. But before we come back to that, let's just let everybody participate in some question and answer.
I have a question for Mike. This is Ben Thomas here in Montana. I'd like to hear your perspective on the farmer fair practices rules that were rolled back in 2017. I know they weren't expansive to the entire industry, but just curious for your thoughts there.
Yeah, I helped with that farmer fair practices stuff, and that's just a disappointment that we can't get something that basic passed through Congress. And the way it is today, you're not going to get anything through the Senate that JBS.
Yeah, I'm talking about the rules that USDA promulgated.
Yeah, well, Sonny Perdue didn't want to do it, so he just set them aside. He didn't approve them. But one of the things Sonny Perdue did early on was move the Packers and Stockyards division into the Ag Marketing Service. totally the wrong place for it. Ag marketing service is about promoting American products, and it certainly isn't where law enforcement should reside. So we didn't have a chance with the farmer fair practices stuff. And there was things in there like fair treatment of poultry growers, the tournament system, the meat packer retaliation. There was a real key set of objectives in there that could have moved us a bit forward. It wasn't near enough, but it was a step in the right direction. So
I completely agree with you. I was deputy undersecretary during that time, and we got a lot of heat for publishing that from the big packers. So I was just surprised to hear the attack of Tom Vilsack. We took heat from all sides on that, and it's pretty disappointing and part of why we weren't successful in keeping those final.
Well, Ben, what comes with market power is political power. And when you say you got heat from all sides, we weigh the meat packer side way heavier than we should. Eaters, consumers, citizens have no power in this economy. We're divided. We're very divided. And we find if we're not divided, we'll figure out a reason by dinner time tonight to be divided.
No.
We've got to restore our basic freedom and liberties. We've got to restore competitive marketplaces. And, I was involved in OCM from the very beginning, 21 years. And there was some argument within our organization about focusing on competitive markets. And I would constantly remind others in the organization that you cannot have competitive markets if you don't have competitors. And so you can't just all of a sudden make the market competitive. You've actually got to break them up. And if we aren't willing to do that, we cannot go forward, and wealth will continue to be concentrated. But the problem is, one of the big mistakes we made was Citizens United. We gave corporations too much power in elections. And it really frustrates me when people say, well, we're just hearing from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and the Kansas Livestock Association and the Montana stock growers, and we're hearing about all these people that really don't want to put limits on meat packers, and we don't want to reduce people's ability to make their own choices and all of that when essentially we're under monopoly control, and Congress most certainly is as well. This is just another reason why we have to build a food system completely separate. And I'm not saying we can just break up the packers tomorrow, but I'm working on every single day how to build a food system that is parallel to the industrial food system. And eventually, if we do our work, we make the industrial model irrelevant.
Okay, we have there's a question about the free slope processing infrastructure and what makes it unique, and whether there are other companies out there offering something similar.
I don't know of other companies that have been successful in designing models of equipment that work. The Friesel one's been around the longest at Trivan. It's really the oldest one that I know of, at least that's been around. And they've just simply perfected the design to where, you can get a USDA inspection on it. That Friesel's basically put together the whole package to where you can buy the equipment, but they'll also help you with your HACCP plan. They'll help you get your grant of inspection. It's more of a turnkey thing. The other thing that Friesel always had was the mobile units. Well, what if you've got a big bull, that weighs 2,400 pounds? Or what if your cows are cow gets bigger and maybe not heavier, but they get longer and bigger. And when you hang them from a rail, their neck is dragging the floor. So if you can go with a modular unit instead of a mobile unit, you can make them wider and you can make them taller. And you can now start adding more value to those animals that really have the most potential to add value to, and that's your cull cows and bulls. But Friesel is by far, I just don't know of another company out there that's doing what they're doing in the way of building mobile and modular units.
Okay, we have another question. What has been your successful most successful story to your consumer, and how have you gotten around avoided certifications?
Well, when you're connected directly to the consumer, why would you need a certification? If you're disconnected from the producer, you can maybe look to a certification, but honestly, they don't mean anything. The certification companies that are out there today aren't trustworthy. They pocket of big industrial ag. I'm sure that Aspen Ridge could probably get a humane certification if they wanted one, but it's a JBS product. The best story to the consumer changes. I remember when we first started Ranch Foods Direct, I was talking to Eric Schlosser, who wrote the book Fast Food Nation, and he says, Mike, it's all about antibiotics and hormones. And he said, you got to tell your customer that there's no antibiotics and hormones. Well, we created that awareness among the consumer, so that obviously was going to be the message. And so when we started out, it's no antibiotics and no hormones. Okay, that's great. But pretty soon, every big packer in the country has that claim, whether it's true or not true. But the number one interest, I think, today of a consumer in purchasing meat is the humane practices. If you can improve the humane treatment of animals that are created for food, that is going to be the biggest thing. And the other one is local. And again, we've been co-opted there. Aspen Ridge, that's why I showed you that JBS brand. Aspen Ridge, I mean, it very likely came from South America. But as meat crosses the border, whether it's from the United States or not, beef and pork, it can be labeled product of the USA. So it's very deceptive and misinforms the consumer. So, where it's from, they want to know, and if it can be from a family. Let's just say we have a public market in Billings, Montana, and it's like the Reading terminal market with the full carcass processing, the cut room. The ranchers show up, once in a while on the weekend and do their shopping, but also hang out a little bit and converse with some of the eaters that are in the space. I mean, that's what it's all about. Certifications are really facilitating the industrial model of agriculture because any of them can meet the certification requirements, whether they're truthful or not. And so I don't like certifications. I want to know where my food comes from and who produced it. I want to be able to go to their ranch if I want to. Just like in St. Francis, Kansas, anyone is always welcome. I mean, we brought out a group of chefs from Denver with the Linger group, and there was probably 50 people that came out on that big travel bus that day. And they stood right on that kill floor and they watched an animal being processed from the time it got knocked all the way through to where it was hanging in the cooler. And you know what? There was hardly a word came out of that group. They were in awe. They absolutely could not believe the process. It was humane. The animal walked in from the pen. Nothing ever got on a truck or a trailer to get there. They walked in on from the pen that they were being raised in. And those people walked away as meat eaters. I mean, even the vegetarians in the group walked away thinking about, eating meat again. And so you've got to have the transparency. And like the biteable thing I showed you, the blockchain, that's all about transparency. The future of food is transparent. And I'm saying the heck with these certifications that just provide cover to an industrial model that is producing fake meat and fake claims. And there's one of the biggest issues we have right now today for newcomers into the business. They're thinking, well, people are going to like me. They're going to like our family. They're going to like our ranch. They're going to like all the regenerative practices and all of that stuff we're doing. Is the people who are claiming it but not doing it. In other words, food fraud. If we could get Congress to step up the law enforcement around truth in advertising, the Federal Trade Commission, Rohit Chopra, keep an eye on him. He needs to be the lead commissioner, and we'd fix a lot of this truth in advertising and food fraud problems.
Mike, I asked all the students to hold their questions just to not dominate this forum. Thank you everyone for letting us participate. I just wanted to ask maybe, could you talk a little bit about how you've seen this conversation change from, say, the time that Eric Schlosser published Fast Food Nation to today?
Yeah, I was really amazed at Eric's book, Fast Food Nation. He did such an amazing job with that book. In fact, I would compare that book to The Jungle. Eric wrote The Jungle of 2000 is what he did. And so we always talk about physics. The more pressure you apply, the more resistance you face. And so I called Eric up, I think it was probably a year ago. And I said, you know, Eric, it's 20 years since that book published. And I said, you know, I hate to say it, but it's worse now. You know, we've already been through a lot of what Eric wrote about. He brought the awareness to the problem, but we had massive pushback on any of those issues that Eric brought up. I mean, we're not treating our workers any better. Producers have lost their share of the consumer dollar, enormous amounts, since Eric published that book. We continue to lose pig producers, which most of them are gone. The dairymen now are pretty much family farm. Independent dairies are gone. I mean, it's only gotten worse. And I was suggesting to Eric that he write a second book and talk about the fact that it's only gotten worse. And it's gotten worse because political power is greater among the corporate sector than it is among the citizenry. We don't have we can't fairly participate in our democracy. When monopoly power takes over, you lose your democracy. And you know, just getting back to, you know, some of what Ben said, if you don't have agencies in Washington who represent the people and rather represent the corporate interests, you've lost your democracy. And I think a lot of the frustration we see today and the people in the streets and, you know, the rioting and the protesting and all of that is because people have not been heard. No one is listening. The decision makers are not acting in the interests of citizens. And so I say, step up the citizenship movement. You know, stop your consumerism, you know, your price shop, part of your community, get on the school board, the city council. I mean, it's just getting harder and harder, but realize that. But man, when you read books like Monopolized and Break Them Up and Liberty from All Masters, now we've got the plan. Zephyr Teachout gives us the plan in Break Them Up. It's there. All we have to do is get the right leadership in place and we can start executing and making this world a lot better.
Mike, I have a question. Well, first, can't thank you enough for your presentation. Just excellent. Really, really great stuff. One problem I've heard repeatedly here in Montana from the processors we work with is their difficulty in finding and retaining workers. And so I'm just curious, I'm wondering what your experience has been there at your facility, and what labor practices and just what things you've done. I know it's a big issue here.
It's our biggest issue probably in operations. People don't know how to process animals. And if you worked at any of the big plants, you don't know either. You just do one thing until your wrist quits working or you get hurt. And then if you're ambidextrous, you can stick around a while longer, but otherwise you go onto the used person pile. We have not taught the skills. And so at Ranch Foods Direct, we love hiring these 70, 80-year-old guys that were retail cutters that used to cut carcasses years and years ago. And we use them and we train people. In fact, we have a fairly good turnover of people who just come in to learn and then go take off and work, you know, building their own thing somewhere. This was certainly the case yesterday when the young man from Pittsburgh came. He is a seriously skilled slaughter man, but now he's going to step up into the more retail piece and start cutting direct to consumer so we can bypass that bottleneck of where do you get it cut up. And so we do a lot of training. The other thing that's really encouraging is the Central Wyoming College has now put in a curriculum to teach. Now that's going to be critical. We're going to be hiring people out of those programs. Wisconsin, Madison, the school there just implemented a new program, a new curriculum for meat cutting, processing, slaughter, all the way through retail. And so we're starting to get some attention to it, but it won't last if the jobs aren't there. And so we've got to rebuild this local regional food system infrastructure to make sure those jobs are there and they're paying living wage. I mean, better than a living wage. These are skilled people. They deserve better than a living wage. I mean, I remember back when I was in high school, I worked in the meat market in Evergreen, Colorado. And the manager of the meat market, I just turned 16 and got my driver's license, but I didn't have a car. And Ron Merchant, the meat market manager, handed me the keys to his brand new Ford 4-wheel drive pickup, one of those tall ones. It was really a cool pickup. And so he says, here, go take it for a spin. I said, no way. What if I wreck it? Oh, you're not going to wreck it. It'll be just fine. Go ahead and take it out. And so I did, scared to death, but I drove it down to Kittredge, 3 miles down that windy canyon and back up to the store and gave him his keys back and thanked him for that opportunity. And now, of course, I want one. You know, it'd be great to have one, but you got to go to work. You got to make some money. But my point is, back in the day, Ron Merchant lived in a nice home that he owned. He drove a new vehicle. Now that same guy can't even pay his rent. He's making so little money. So we have to build that alternative pathway to the consumer and redistribute those dollars where they belong. And at the same time, we've got to knock out the monopolies. We've got to make a monopoly that isn't public. Public monopolies are fine because they serve the public interest, like utilities, right? We've got to make monopolies illegal in this country. It's the biggest threat to our freedom and our democracy, and to a living wage for these young people that are learning the necessary skills to even survive as a human.
So Mike, as your answer to Matt's question demonstrates, we're going to have to keep toggling back and forth between the on-the-ground nuts and bolts questions and the broader political questions. So with that in mind, I'd like to get your perspective on there's a lot of talk about the urban-rural divide in this country. I'd like to get your perspective on the cultural divide within the beef industry itself. You alluded to the role that the cattlemen and the anti-monopoly efforts have played. You also alluded to the role that NCBA and other stock growers associations have played. Montana is a classic illustration of this dilemma that we have, I think, in rural America. The stock growers really play a significant cultural role as a rural brotherhood. And in many ways, that's got some positive community history that is very valuable to people. I would argue to some extent that positive cultural brotherhood has been exploited by people who want to take advantage of it to their end. And that's what has allowed organizations like the stock growers to continue to resist active fighting against monopolies. I think we have both in government and in agriculture a weird mixture of naivete and very sophisticated complicity. I'm not going to make any assessment of whether Montana has this issue worse or better than other states, but I would like to hear what comments you have to say about how we can crack that nut, because I think there is a huge amount of grassroots activity that is interested and has energy and even can find money to rebuild a decentralized packing infrastructure. But I don't think we're going to get the necessary political and marketing background that you're talking about unless we can find a constructive way to address that cultural divide within agriculture.
You know, we worked for many years. I was an NCA member, became an NCBA member. I was a Kansas Livestock Association member. And then as time passed, you realized you couldn't change policy within those organizations because of really the meat packer power and the big feedlots who can't say anything bad about a meat packer. And there's enough of those bigger feed yard operators that if you give them a little advantage over their neighbor through a captive supply sweetheart deal, I mean, they'll actively go out there and promote the meat packers' interests. And so I don't know how we crack that nut. I think a good start would be repealing the checkoffs, get rid of them, defund them. As long as they have that $80 million a year that they can use to buy Congress, they will do that. And we can start by defunding them, making them more accountable. One of the problems we see, like in some of these stock grower groups and the NCBA, is just sort of track the former presidents of Califax. I mean, these organizations are really good at pumping people up to get them to, read the script that they might not even agree with, but they read the script, and the script was drafted by the meat packer faction within the organization. But track those people that have been in those positions and where are they today? We just play this sort of fool's game that, if you'll join me, I'll take care of you. You'll get a sweetheart deal. You'll do well because we're gonna show you favoritism. And unfortunately, that's human nature, And so I see our path forward is not so much in agreeing with all of our neighbors. I mean, because ranchers in particular, farmers as well, are independent folks that honestly, we shouldn't have to force them to get along with everyone. I mean, part of their strength is also their weakness. They're independent. That's a strength, but it's also a weakness. And we're easily divided on social issues, which then takes our focus off of the really important economic issues that are going to determine whether or not our kids are going to be able to come back or grandkids are going to be able to come back. But I think the key to winning on this is getting the consumer on our side, getting the eater on our side, turning more consumers into citizens and getting them to vote in favor of good food policy. That is how we win. We can't, if we allow Congress to say, look, you ranchers all have to agree. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Vilsack and some of these secretaries of agriculture say, look, you guys can't agree on anything, so we're going to ignore the problem. Well, that's just the nature of human beings. We're not going to agree on everything. And so, in being frustrated with the NCBA and the KLA and these kinds of organizations, we form new organizations. But now they're all cycling around, and some of them are becoming captured, and some of them are willing to compromise on policy at the expense of their membership. And so it's really hard. And I think we just have to win the consumer over in our food fight. But boy, if you want to get in a battle with a bunch of ranchers, talk about racial justice. Talk about some of the fairness concepts. Around an economy that's fair. Talk about equality. Talk about private property rights if you want to really get in a fight. There won't be any private property if things continue the way they are. The ranchers that are most concerned about the private property rights aren't even going to have any property because they're shipping out the equity with every load of calves that they send out. So I think the way to succeed is through the consumer groups. I think we have to align with the consumer groups. And this is one of the reasons that the Organization for Competitive Markets years ago decided to work with the Humane Society. I mean, all they care about is buying meat from animals that are treated humanely. And of course they've been made wrong because they're a powerful organization, but there was 11 million people in that organization that could go to the Hill in Washington and do some serious lobbying. I think we've got to do more of that.
Other questions?
Yeah, I got one. This is Jeff Krasinski. So, Mike, when are you going to run for president and be the next Teddy Roosevelt and trust buster?
I'm going to hope Rohit Chopra does that for the Federal Trade Commission. I want to go home and take care of cattle and that. I want to do my part in my industry. I don't want to have to worry about other stuff. There's other people way better than me that would make a politician.
Tom,
thank you for that question.
Tom Cheetah has a question about your opinion on the related legislation going around, including the Prime Act and new markets.
Yeah, the Prime Act doesn't go near far enough. I mean, how many of you know, a wild game guy that processes his deer and elk in his garage? We need inspection. That you cannot do this without inspection. And I mean, and the plants that are the least inspected are the big plants with the fastest chains and the most inexperienced workers, and the plants that are the most not so much inspected but harassed are the small plants. And so, we get all frustrated with USDA because they favor big plants over small plants and make it very hard for small plants to operate with these passive plans that really don't make food safer and all of that. And so we want to just throw it away. We don't want inspection. But if you don't think inspection is important, look at the jungle. Look at just the big recalls that we have almost every day now out of the big plants. You do need inspection. You do need somebody on site that's doing a pre-mortem and a post-mortem inspection of these animals. Otherwise, there's going to be some bad things happen. And when you're in an economy where the biggest cheater wins, think about what could happen in that regard when it comes to slaughter. So I do not advocate for the Prime Act. I advocate for more local and state inspection. I say fund the state inspection in all these states, but don't stop worrying about what it's costing you. If you can allow more small plants to be in business with a less onerous state inspection, I didn't say less inspection or a less safe product, less onerous inspection, putting out a safer, better product. Think what you're doing for your state in regards to the farm and ranch gate income and the taxes that would generate for a state. If you just give a market to the people who create the wealth and produce the food in our states. Go back to state inspection. It's just simply wrong that the Batista brothers from Brazil have better access to our nation's states than anyone living in a particular state. So we've got tainted beef, rotten meat from the Batista brothers at JBS coming into all across the United States, and yet I can't ship meat from Kansas into Colorado with state inspection. That's just wrong. So we have to fix that. But we absolutely need inspection. Prime Act doesn't do that. Prime Act avoids the real problem of just concentration and consolidation. We aren't going to get access with no inspection. What local grocery store is going to want to handle any kind of a product without inspection? What's their liability insurance going to be selling product with no inspection? What consumer might support that? And I'm just saying, state inspection ought to be re-implemented. It ought to be financed by the state, not at the cost of a processor. And states can go a long way then in working together. There's no reason Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana shouldn't have a joint cooperation agreement on state inspection, because Montana needs the Front Range to sell what they produce, and so does Wyoming. And it would benefit all states. Throw in Mexico.
That's why the new market, that's exactly what the new market legislation is proposing, that Senator Tester is a co-sponsor of.
No, I like the new market legislation. That's a good. I say the Prime Act just needs to go away.
I agree on that.
Well, it's getting late. This has been a mouthful. We could probably sit here for a lot longer. I really want to thank you again, Mike. I'm probably going to send you an inquiry about how we can share some of the information that was on your slides. If there are no other urgent questions, we should probably begin to wind up, but obviously this is an unfinished and vibrant discussion. Any other particular things you want to say, Mike, before we close?
Yeah, just keep your eye on the predators. You know, we can get so excited about new stuff, building new things, and you know, but you got to watch the predators in this marketplace. They're everywhere, and you've got to develop that direct pathway to the consumer. And you know, Ranch Foods Direct's been around 20 years. We've been in the schools and we're out of the schools. We've been in the institutions, we're out of the institutions. You know, we've already had the Good Food Project in Colorado Springs, which was a nationally just an example of what we can do in school lunch. It totally failed when the predators showed up and started underpricing everything. And so you got to keep your eye on the risks and the threats, and deal directly with that end consumer every way possible. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you
Oh.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to repeat one more thing, Jamie, and I'm going to hand it off to you for anything else. I just want to repeat the statement I made earlier. If there are other questions or inquiries that anybody has on this call, I will, Jamie and I will act as somewhat of a clearinghouse for that, because I don't want to lose all the thoughts that are rolling in our heads at the moment. So feel free to send us emails, and we're going to try to keep this going. I mean, ultimately, at a minimum, this group can serve as a network for information sharing as we all try to build these alternative markets that Mike is talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will try to get this recording up on our YouTube channel. And then Mike has graciously agreed to present for MOA again in December. And so I will let y'all know when that will be. So thanks everyone for attending. These conversations are great, and I think they're moving us forward.
Thanks, everybody.